and then in his robot recreated daughter's memory, making it canon that his son is dead. His alive son is dead. That's crazy fuck.
Ladies, gentlemen, and those with the good sense to do away with the whole notion, I welcome you to the premier audio medium for all your Fazbear entertainment needs. The Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. Note, FFPP is not responsible for any loss of appetite, disinterest, dismemberment, or other legally classified statuses. So strap in and enjoy.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. I'm your host of the Toast, Rytoast, here to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's, like we always do, and like we have for the past 100 episodes. Yeah, sorry, I'm checking a baby cam immediately. Bad recorder. It's crazy to me that this has gone on for 2+ years. So people informed me the 2-year anniversary was on September 4th, I believe. So it was, I missed a week or two, or at some point things got pushed back, but here we are, and there's somehow still stuff to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's. So we keep on keeping on. As far as the future of the podcast, I do want to get more guests in. I think guest episodes are a lot of fun. And I hope that once I get a backlog established, I'll have a more regular schedule where I can do that. Because right now, everything's kind of in flux and I'm recording things sporadically as I can. So it's hard to schedule a guest episode when sometimes I record these at 1 a.m. and sometimes I record them at noon, I realize the way I crop this you can't see, but I just opened up the curtain and blinding light came in. So that's the plan, and I think eventually we'll try to start seeding in some non-FNAF stuff too, which we all do already to a point. We'll take non-FNAF questions, but I think some non-FNAF episodes could be fun too, which, the whole point of this is the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast, but variety is the spice of life, so every now and then. But I didn't want to just wax poetic about the podcast for this episode. I wanted to answer y'all's questions, so I grabbed a whole bunch of fairly general FNAF questions that I could find. I think there's definitely clearly some Secret of the Mimic questions in there, but I did try to lean towards some general FNAF questions as well, especially because I think I'm getting to the point where we're going to put less of a focus on Secret of the Mimic for upcoming videos, because we've spent pretty much exclusively the past 3 months talking about it, because it is a very dense game. That's not going to change this week, but I think next week I was going to do a updated what happened to Bonnie now that we got that one interview, which we'll get. Let me write that down before I forget. Well, part of that is this first question, so we'll do questions and hopefully that'll help remind me. But our first question comes from Kai. Oh, I almost forgot. If you want your questions answered on the podcast, feel free to send them into Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. That is in the description to copy and paste because it is a pain to type out. But our first question comes from Kai, he, they. My question: do you think M1, aka Fiona, being in charge of the Pizzaplex could explain the Monty versus Bonnie situation? Because if Monty did kill Bonnie, that's an MCM design taking out an Afton design and making the core 4 at the Pizzaplex closer to Fiona/Edwin's ideas than Williams. Thank you for your question, Kai. That is interesting, isn't it? Especially if you consider. So, here's an interesting take. The current Pizzaplex band seems to have changed over time. In the Storyteller, I believe, Chica's described as yellow and much closer to the original Chica, or the FNAF 1 Chica, than the Glamrock Chica version we see in-game. And the thinking is that after Chica gets demolished from the Storyteller disaster, she is then replaced with Glamrock Chica. Recently, there's an interview with, I need to look into the details, but there was some kind of, person who works at Steelwool who was talking about working shop with this game, and they mentioned that in Ruin, when Monty is killed by the electric sign, it's a bit of retribution that the thing he killed him, which is kind of confirming that Bonnie killed Monty, which was kind of the obvious answer, but it wasn't the one a lot of people were going with. I personally really liked I'm gonna forget the person who posted it. Somebody posted it to Reddit. It was a really, really solid thread. I've talked about it before on the channel about Bonnie discovering what's going on and being killed by the staff bots underground. I do like that theory a lot, but this is kind of soft confirming that, like, yes, Monty killed him, which is interesting if so. But the my thinking was always that Vanny directed Monty to do that for some end. Maybe they needed pieces from Bonnie for Burn Trap. Maybe, Bonnie did find out something and Vanny was tying up that loose end. Who can say? But I do like this concept of, Fiona slowly trying to take over the Pizzaplex. And part of that is, well, Monty's my creation. I'm going to have him destroy Bonnie and replace him. Roxy being part of the main band is another thing about that. And then looking at, wrapping back to what I was talking about with Chica, Glamrock Chica is very different than, FNAF 1 Chica or anything like that. Part of me wants to say maybe that's Fiona's doing as well because of the whole Chica's Party World thing. But Chica's Party World Chica is, I would say, closer to FNAF 1 Chica than Glamrock Chica. So that probably doesn't hold up as well. But it is an interesting concept, especially considering that, if Chica was originally designed by Fiona, then theoretically, the Glamrock band is 3 Fiona designs and 1 Afton design. That being, Freddy. So it is interesting. I think there's merit there to look into. That'll probably be next week's video. Just the concept of if Monty killed Bonnie, then, we got to talk about that. But thank you for your question. Our next question comes from Rin, they, them. I'm curious about how you plan to continue the podcast. I know this has been mainly about FNAF, it being the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast and all, but I was wondering if you plan to expand to other games / other horror games as well. As much as I love FNAF, it'd be awesome to listen to you talk about other games like you did with Poppy, Shipwreck 64, and such. Also, out of curiosity, and if you're comfortable with answering, how many questions do you get every week? I've always been kind of curious about the ratio of people watching versus the people who give questions. Thank you for your question. I will tell you, not everybody who watches gives questions, and I'm glad for that because that would be an insane amount of emails. My email would flood because I can't get over the support that this podcast has received. It is truly insane. But as that's a quick answer. I would say I usually get 30 to 40 questions. No, probably 20 to 30 questions a week. Just rough guessing. And so I try to answer as many as I can. The thing that makes the most sense is to pick from newest to oldest and go down the line until I get a good 4 to 6 questions to answer. Because if I tried to answer every single one, we'd be backlogged to hell. So, some people will say like, oh, you missed my question. And you said you cleared your backlog. That's not true. I said I was trying to. 9 times out of 10, if I don't answer your question, it's because it just got buried. So, if it's been a couple episodes and I haven't answered a question, feel free to send it in again, because there's a very high likelihood that it just got muddied in the waters. There's also the other possibility. Sometimes I won't answer a question if I think the answer is very brief. If there's not a good discussion to be had there. I will try to email the answer that way. If you've ever gotten an email from me that says like, yeah, probably, then that means that like I saw your question. I don't have much to add to it. But yeah, I usually will sort new to old. So there are ones that get missed. So that's just something to keep in mind. And then as far as how I'm going to continue the podcast, I don't see a future where this podcast isn't FNAF focused as the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. The Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. I don't see a world where it's not FNAF focused. However, I do see a world where an episode a month or so are not. Or at least the topic isn't FNAF focused. Maybe the questions will come in and wrap a nice bow and bring us back to FNAF. But, this is the perfect forum for me to talk about other things in a way that won't damage the overall algorithm and monetization of the channel. Because this is more laid back. This is more open and free-flowing. So this is a good time to bring up those topics. Like, I keep wanting to do an episode on a feminist lens critique of Secret of the Mimic. But does that make sense for a main channel video? I don't think so. It does probably make more sense for a podcast like this, where it can kind of lecture versus doing bits and ha-has and making things snappy, because any literary analysis is benefited by a lecture format, taking your time, going over your points and things like that. So I could see this podcast getting much more experimental as it continues, but I would say I wouldn't do that for every episode, because I wouldn't want to lose everybody. Some people are just here for a calm voice talking about Five Nights at Freddy's, and that's perfectly valid. I don't want to disrupt that in any way. But thank you for your question, Rin. Our next question comes from Squid, she. This sounds silly at first, but hear me out. Remnant works like Pope Holy Water. Which is you're right, and I like this question a lot, but when I read Remnant works like Pope Holy Water, I needed to know more. If you don't know, just a bit of Pope's holy water can be added to normal water, and then it's all holy water. So what if the same is true for Remnant? A few hunks of haunted metal can go a long way with this theory. Thus, how Edwin has so much goo and the Pizzaplex can power so much space. I've had this theory for a while, but thought it might work for our dear friend Edwin Murray after your video. It's an interesting concept, and one that, does in a way have evidence. So we never really get the mechanics behind Remnant injection, but there is that moment from the Silver Eyes where William Afton is waxing poetic about being a villain or whatever, and he takes a syringe full of molten Remnant from the melted together amalgamation, and he injects that syringe full into Funtime Freddy, and Funtime Freddy animates and is doing his bidding. So it was that's all we see is that direct moment. And we never really given the mechanical explanation of how that works. But in a way, it is kind of your explanation, is it not? The idea of, Funtime Freddy is a mass of metal and wires, and suddenly some molten metal has been added, and the entire thing is being animated by that molten metal. Is that not evidence that it essentially made the entire thing Remnant, a combination of metal and soul? That's fair. That is possible. We don't know the limitations of Remnant. I think this interpretation, I think you're right, this might be the best way to explain that, to give evidence for the factory being powered by Remnant. And I do want to be clear, because I got a lot of shit for this on Twitter from that out of context clip. Am I saying that it is definitely true that the goo in Murray's Costume Manor is Remnant? No. I'm not even saying it's likely, but I'm saying it could be, and if it is, it fits into the timeline very nicely. That's all I'm saying with this, and I think your interpretation of Pope Holy Water does add to that. The idea that, as long as a couple people died in that vat, suddenly all this metal is haunted. It kind of gives way to both answers being correct. The idea of maybe Murray's Costume Manor was already being powered by molten metal, and that's it. But I think you still need to explain why 8 tubes worth are being pumped directly into Murray's personal house. There's no way in hell his house requires that much molten metal to be powered. So why is he collecting it? Well, if it was originally just molten metal powering the facility, and then suddenly somebody dies and is thrown in the pile, and now it's all Remnant, now Edwin Murray might want to study it. This also would give way for Edwin surviving whatever happens to him. We know that Remnant has healing properties. Peek behind the curtain, I had to go help with some groceries, so I hope I'm not retreading any ground. I think I remember what I was saying before I walked away, but Remnant being a sort of accidental discovery does kind of track, especially if it was some accident or somebody dies in a Springlock suit and they just don't have the funds to deal with it, so they throw them in, and suddenly all this molten metal is something that Edwin wants to study and learn more about, so he begins redirecting it to the house. That does make sense, and that it could even be the idea of this isn't necessarily an experiment he's trying to do. He has a new thing in front of him that he's trying to learn more about. I think that does track. I think that makes a lot of sense. Again, is it the most likely scenario? Who can say? Probably not, but I think it's interesting to think about. And it could fit really nicely in the timeline is the thing. So thank you for your Pope water analogy, Squid. It's actually very helpful. Our next question comes from Alyssa, they, them. In your recent video, Is Murray's Costume Manor Powered by Remnant? You mentioned there's certain world-building tidbits that are placed in games such as Fazbear hunting bears to extinction. As a day one FNAF fan, I was terrified of anything yellow or golden that was a rabbit shaped for a long time from the FNAF 3 trailer. I'm annoyed at myself for not being aware of these. Would you be able to elaborate on some of the funny, weird, and interesting world-building aspects of the series as we have it today? Yes, I can. I love this stuff. You know what? Now that I think about it, I can't pull up a list of these, because if you Google what are weird facts about the FNAF world, you get facts about FNAF world. This is a really hard list to look up. But I know I should be clear. I don't think it is ever stated that Fazbear hunted them down. But the Faz fact is that bears used to hunt after pizza trucks before they went extinct. So, you know, whether that's because of eating pizza or they only wanted pizza and they didn't eat anything else, they starved, or, you know, it's not unlikely in the Fazbear universe if Fazbear Entertainment found that their pizza trucks kept getting stopped by bears, so they just killed all the bears. That's not something that Fazbear wouldn't do, right? Fazbear is pretty crazy. Especially, I do wonder, you know, it's interesting to think about. It's just a fun fact. It's just a random fun fact that bears really like pizza in this world. Do we think that could have inspired Freddy Fazbear himself in any way? The idea of like, well, I mean, bears love pizza, so why not just do a bear character? And then that kind of, or is it like a self-fulfilling prophecy that everyone was like, oh, bears love pizza because, you know, Freddy Fazbear's pizza. I don't know. It's interesting to think about. I do constantly wonder about the inspirations for the FNAF characters. Ever since we got the Help Wanted 2 teaser, where we see that stained glass window, where it's got this very old caravan, a yellow Freddy, and a blue Bonnie. Because when I look at that, I don't see, you know, just a specific area. To me, it's like, this looks like the bear and rabbit character go back before Fazbear. Like, this looks like these characters are from something bigger than any of this. Is that where it's going? Probably not. But it is interesting to think about, like, is Fazbear the modern iteration of some mask-based cult that goes back centuries? Maybe. That could be a fun little twist for one of the games. I don't know. Would that alienate people even more? Possibly. I don't know. But it's interesting to think about when you look at all the, like, really old-fashioned inspirations for Fazbear, because we have that, we have like Mystic Hippo in general is very, like, yes, Fall Fest coded, but just old-fashioned coded in general. I don't know, it's interesting to think about. But as far as fun facts, it's actually really hard to find them, so no. But I'm sure somebody has a YouTube video out there somewhere chronicling the weird facts about the FNAF world that isn't weird facts about FNAF world. But thank you for your question, Alyssa. Our next one comes from Lee, she, they, he. Do you think Funtime Freddy is based off of Mr. Helpful? A common thought was that Helpy was designed after Funtime Freddy, so connecting the two older designs is interesting. Yeah, I mean, I thought that Helpy was designed after Funtime Freddy. Like, Funtime Freddy was the character, and then Helpy was the chibi version of it. But it seems more likely that Helpy, or the Helper character, originated from an MCM design. You know, Mr. Helpful, Mrs. Helpful, and then there's Helpy. So it's almost like Funtime Freddy is the big version of Helpy, not the other way around, which is interesting, isn't it? I wonder if it has anything to do with sister location likely being built in the underground tunnels underneath Murray's house. Maybe the Funtimes were animatronics that were, you know, made by William and directly ripped off the designs for the Helpfuls. If I wonder even if the unfinished Mr. Helpful that we see at the end of the game is eventually turned into Helpy. Who knows, you know? But you're right to point out that, like, these designs are very similar in a way that is interesting to think about at the least. I mean, hell, it even puts into question the Funtimes in general on why they're so different. Is that because this is Afton's first foray designing his own characters? Maybe Henry designed the other ones. You know, there's a lot of weirdness around sister location being involved in the space underneath the Murray's house. especially now that Helpful is a character that predates the Funtimes. No, it's very, very interesting. I hesitate to say that the prototypes are involved, but we do have these prototype animatronics that could have been. No, they're too different. They look too different. Even in their very basic forms, they just don't match the Funtimes at all. No, it's really interesting to think about the connections between Helpy and Mr. Helpful, especially with how prominent Helpy is now. Helpy has been like a main character since FNAF 6, which says a lot. And frankly, kind of explains why. If Helpy popped up around FNAF 6, that is, I believe, the FNAF 6 pizzeria is the R&D research development pizzeria from Secret of the Mimic. So that would kind of explain why Helpy suddenly appeared around FNAF 6, because that's where it was created. That kind of does line up really well, actually. And then, the Funtimes were based off of the look of Helpy. But yes, thank you for your question, Lee. Our next one comes from T West. She, her. Out of all the games, which one do you feel the most confident you could survive through in real life? Are you or any human being truly equipped to survive Five Nights at Freddy's? Now, the cheap answer is Security Breach. Because Gregory is only in danger for trying to be a hero. If Gregory was just trying to survive, all he would need to do is stay in like a closet and wait. I'm now, to be fair, he is kind of being hunted down. So I guess theoretically, if he tried that, maybe Monty would find him or something. But like, Security Breach gives you the best odds at playing the waiting game because it's such a big facility that if you can find a good hiding spot, all you have to do is hide for 6 hours. You only survive in one night at Security Breach. But to give a more interesting answer, let's take off Security Breach and Secret of the Mimic, which again, just leave. Let's talk Main 6. No, and we'll take off Pizzeria Simulator 2, because Pizzeria Simulator, don't salvage anybody, and suddenly you survive. So, just the first 5 games, playing through their gameplay, what do I think I survive? And this assumes, and just for the sake of the argument, we'll assume that FNAF 4 is a deadly situation. You know what? To make it a more fun argument, we'll do that too. FNAF 6, assuming you salvage everybody. FNAF 4, assuming if you die in the game, you die for real. It's not just a nightmare. Because if FNAF 4 is just a nightmare, we win. So if FNAF 4 kills you if you die, and if FNAF 6, you have to salvage every animatronic. Right away, it ain't FNAF 6. FNAF 6, it like, just as a game, is frankly, I think, the hardest nighttime gameplay because it's so unclear as to what actually helps you and how to actually survive. Every time I've asked people how to play this game, sometimes I'll get a real answer, and some of the best players of FNAF 6 I know go, oh yeah, you just kind of do this and hope. No one really knows how this game works. So I'm not looking forward to my chances of surviving FNAF 6 when some of the best players of it I know go, you just kind of cross your fingers. Next up is Sister Location. And I'll go least likely to most likely, I think. Because Sister Location is, I think, higher up on that list. I think next we have to go FNAF 4. Because FNAF 4 as a survival situation is, pun intended, a nightmare. The idea that, assuming I don't have any of my FNAF game knowledge, learning FNAF 4 is very difficult. I would get it wrong pretty quickly. Because like the whole thing about FNAF 4, just the normal gameplay alone of open the door, like be at the door. If they're close enough to hear them, close the door. If they're not, then use your flashlight. Assuming I somehow knew that knowledge, putting that to work in the real world is going to be difficult. But even if I somehow, by the skin of my teeth, survive every night until then, the moment Nightmare Fredbear pops up and changes how the game works, I'm cooked. I'm cooked because I'm going to do what I've been doing, which is incorrect. Where I'll see him at the end of the hallway, flash my flashlight, and be like, cool. And then I'll die because of it. The FNAF 4 rule change, while a fun concept, is so rude to a first-time player. So, I mean, and, you know, besides the fact that I'd be pissing myself scared because, you know, I'm in a dark room by myself with a flashlight, I'm not surviving FNAF 4. That's a rough survive. Next on the list is FNAF 2. FNAF 2 there's just so much happening. FNAF 2 is one of the hardest games in the franchise because there's just so much shit happening, and sometimes you just can't win. Like, there are times where Toy Bonnie will attack you so frequently that you're just going to lose, and there's nothing you can do about it. That being said, you know, if you get in your rhythm, it's fairly easy, but you need to be at that rhythm so consistently for, if this were real, 6 full hours. Right? Like, that's the thing. FNAF 2 is an endurance test more than it is difficult or a puzzle game. And I don't have 6-hour endurance to check, wind, check, wind, check, wind, check, wind, mask, unmask, check, wind, check, wind. I don't have that endurance. So FNAF 2 is going to kill me for sure. So now we're left with FNAF 1, 3, and 5. I think Sister Location is the next, the next less hard. We're getting easier and easier. So this is the next easiest, I think, is Sister Location. And that's mainly because you're only really in danger like 4 times throughout the entire time you're there. And really it all comes down to the Springlock mini arenas on night 4. Because like night 1, I don't even know if you can. I don't remember. I don't think you can die night 1. I think you're just doing your tasks and you're fine. Night 2, I believe, is the Biddy Babs and then Funtime Freddy. The Biddy Babs, so easy. Just hold a grate shut. It's free. Funtime Freddy, is this fuse or is this power module? I think it's fuse first and then power module. Well, if it's the fuse, you know, the fuse is difficult because of the way the game is structured. You see this in Help Wanted 2, that the doing the fuse is there. It's kind of easier that you can look around while dealing with them. You know, so theoretically, if Sister Location is difficult, that fuse minigame is difficult in Sister Location, because when you're doing your fuse, you have to, like, iPad kid to do the fuses, and you can't look at the room. But if I could just, like, hold the button and look around, you know, take the audio thing in my other hand, just click it while I'm, like, holding the button, we're chilling. We're easy. Power module, little tougher. But I think it would also be easier in the sense that the main thing that ever kills me in Funtime Freddy's power module is Bonbon, trying to catch Bonbon, because it's so hard to do that with the mechanics. But assuming the flashlight's bright enough, if I just point it directly at Funtime Freddy's chest, I'll be able to see wherever Bonbon could show up and very quickly, in the dark, just press the button. You know what I mean? Like, that, again, another game that would be easier in real life. Traversal, we get Funtime Foxy's Auditorium and Ballora Gallery. Ballora Gallery, if it's anything like Help Wanted 2, is going to be one of the tougher parts, because she is a hawk for sound, and her little mini arenas are a problem. But I think just being very quiet, it's a 50-50. Because if you're very quiet, she's not going to target you, but she could just hit you by accident. So it's a 50-50. That's probably our most likely chance to die. Funtime Foxy, if he works like he works in every game iteration we've been in, you know, all you have to do is take your time, and she's not a problem. So, like, they are going to be everywhere. And all you have to do is flash, they're not in front of you, walk a couple steps, wait a moment, flash, they're not in front of you, walk a couple steps, wait a moment, flash, they're not in front of you. Like, it's very monotonous in its safety. So Funtime Freddy, they're not an issue. Ballora is an issue. Then we get to Night 4. Night 4 is rough. We have to survive in a Springlock suit while mini arenas are pouring inside of it. This is our lowest odds of survival here. This is where shit gets real. I think out of 100 times, I get out of here maybe 5 times. I don't like my odds here, but they are odds nonetheless. They are survivable nonetheless. And if we survive that, then it's, it's kind of easy. No, because to survive, we would have to do... I guess this assumes we're Michael Afton here, so we survive as long as we do Circus Baby's thing, which is easy, and then listen to her, which is easy. We get scooped, which hurts a lot, but Michael Afton survived, so I guess we survive that, and then we walk away. So, again, not likely, but this is the first one I think it's possible we survive in. Then our next one is FNAF 1. FNAF 1, it's pretty clear what to do here. And looking at the week before, there's other ways to survive than just doing doors in the office. Like Ralph goes about and cleans stuff and just ducks out of the way when one of them walks by. So theoretically, I think FNAF 1 is fairly survivable. Again, going off of the week before logic, if they're trying to escape and hunt you down, then we're going to have issues. But going off of the game logic, what we see in FNAF 1, it's not that hard to keep track of them, keep them out of your office, and hope. So I see FNAF 1 being fairly survivable. I give myself 30% odds on do I survive a real FNAF 1 experience. And then there's FNAF 3. FNAF 3, I think, has to be the easiest one to survive in. Because frankly, it's the easiest one to play because, as always, there's exactly one real threat in the entire facility, which you can lure around with audio lures. If you get him near the exit door, you keep him there, you lock the vent next to him, and you just chill for the rest of the night. I give myself 60% odds to survive FNAF 3 in real life. I think it's by far the most straightforward one. And, the phantoms can't kill you. Springtrap is only going to kill you if you're not paying attention to him. And once you find him once, you're good. Not to mention, I'm sorry, how strong can Springtrap possibly be? Man, I think Springtrap could be killed with a swift kick. That's my headcanon. I think he's frail. But I don't know. I guess he is a full animatronic too. But he's so withered. He's so dirty and gross and rotted. I feel like he's less strong than... I feel like logically in real life he'd be less strong than he seems to be in FNAF 3. That's my take on that anyway. But thank you for your question. That's going to be crazy if that's the one I spent the most time on. Our next question comes from Parker. They, them. Why does Freddy's nose boop? 'Cause funny. Our last question... No, I think it really just is... Scott added that Freddy Nose Boop Easter egg in the first game, and everyone loved it so much that he just kept it going throughout the franchise. I don't know if you could pull any lore from it, and I don't think I even want to. I want to keep that sacred. I do really like the Freddy Nose Boop. I think it's a wonderful, charming touch. And our last question comes from Robin, she, her. I wanted to ask, what is your perception of Henry now that the Murrays have been introduced? How does Henry as a character for the narrative? Is he just as bad as William Afton? Or was he an old employee of Edwin that betrayed him and suffered from karma? Or is he manipulated by William the whole time? Thank you for your question. I don't think Henry is faultless, right? I think the thing we're learning in Secret of the Mimic is Henry is not who we thought he was. The assumption going into, assumption before Secret of the Mimic was Henry was kind of a victim who... was manipulated by William Afton and was an innocent man the whole time. And Secret of the Mimic kind of is showing us that Henry wasn't the perfect man we kind of thought he was. He seems to also be pretty flawed, pretty kind of a bad person, at least in a business sense. I still do think it makes a lot of sense for Henry to have been a previous MCM employee. And if that's true, then William Afton approached Henry and was like, hey, you want to join this new franchise and give me this sheet list. Now, I don't think Henry is as bad as William. I want to be clear on that. William Afton is definitely the piece of shit here. Because I think it is very reasonable for Henry Emily, who has a child, who's attached high up to this failing, about to be bankrupt business, when receiving a new job offer, jumps at it. I think that's valid. I don't think that Henry knew how much William was fucking MCM. But I don't think Henry is this perfect little special boy that we thought he was, especially considering the one line from Edwin where it was like, why does Hen want to change the designs? What's wrong with the spring locks? We can just have a teenager wear them like we always do. I don't know if that's implying that teenagers are less likely to set off the spring traps, or it's implying that teenagers are expendable. You know, I don't know what that's implying, but that's a crazy implication either way. I do wonder if part of the FNAF 6 speech is referring to this moment. The line of like, this monster I unwittingly helped to create. If he's reflecting on, you know, yeah, I agreed to join his company, but I didn't think we were going to bankrupt MCM and then become this behemoth afterwards. I thought I was just going to get to manage a franchise location. You know, it is an interesting concept. But I do think Henry being the creator of the FNAF 1 animatronics, I think that's still true. I think that's still incredibly likely. I think part of it is because he was making animatronics for MCM, and part of it is, you know, whether or not he was, by the end of Secret of the Mimic, we see that Murray's Costume Manor never made finished FNAF 1 animatronics. They had like some bare bones prototypes. So someone would have had, even if they did use those prototypes, someone would have to do the remaining 70% of the work on them, you know? So I think that Henry is still the creator, still the inventor, and I do think he's still generally a victim, but I think Secret of the Mimic is showing us that he is like a human being with faults. He is someone who does wrong at times. He's not a perfect little guy. Especially like if Henry was also helping to steal some of these designs with his high up position. You know, I think it is indicative that Henry is not as good as we thought he may have been. And looking at the books, that tracks too, because I still hold true that Henry Emily is also a piece of shit father in the FNAF universe. Because, look, I'm not going to judge him for making the Charlie bots. I can't imagine what grief he's going through. I can judge him for forgetting he has a son, and then in his robot recreated daughter's memory, making it canon that his son is dead. His alive son is dead. That's crazy fucked up. That's so fucked. Because in the books, we get that line where it's like, Henry, your wife is leaving you and taking your son because of this obsession. Meaning his son is still alive and his wife is still alive. And he gets so obsessed in making this Charlie bot that they both leave him. And then once he's done making the Charlie bot, he didn't have to give her the memory of Sammy being abducted. He could have just let her be. But he's like, no, this memory could come up, but it can't be her. So I'll just have it be that in her mind, her brother is dead. So he's, instead of, you know, strengthening his bond with his alive son and his wife, when his daughter dies, he goes, I'm going to focus my entire life into recreating her. And when I'm done, I'm going to make her and myself think that my alive son is dead. I can't get over that. That's so fucked. So, like, in the books, Henry's not a perfect guy either. So I think Secret of the Mimic is really showing us that Henry can be a bad person too. But thank you for your question. Once again, if you want your questions answered on the podcast, feel free to send them into Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. But I think we're at time. I peeked behind the curtain. I had 2 pretty long breaks from having to go help with groceries and help wake up my kiddo from a nap. So I don't know where we're at. In the recording, we're at over an hour. But I want to say we're at maybe 45 minutes. We'll find out. But, you know, again, this is the 100th episode, which is a crazy number, and I cannot thank all of you enough for the support that you've shown this podcast and the channels in general. So here's to 100 more, and, you know, hopefully by then I'm covering stuff other than just FNAF, but we'll see. But until next time, as always, thank you for watching the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast, where the pizza abilities are endless. We hope to enjoy your future patronage. Bye-bye for now.